out there. I think Congress would do well to settle it today. I urge my colleagues to do so. I thank the chairman. Yield the floor. Madam President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Michigan.
Madam President, in a few minutes, I'm going to be making...
Quorum call, Senator.
I appreciate the presiding officer. I ask unanimous consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Madam President, in a few moments, Senator McCain and I will be seeking unanimous consent that the following pending and germane amendments be considered en bloc, that the amendments be modified with the changes that are at the desk where applicable. Begich 1114 is modified, McCain 1220, Reed of Rhode Island 1146 as modified, 111293 as modified, Boxer 1206, Chambliss 1304 as modified, Pryor 1151, Nelson of Florida 1236, Blunt 1133, and Murkowski 1287. Further, that the amendments be agreed to en bloc. We're not making that request now. We will be making that request in a few minutes. This is not the so-called manager's package, by the way. This is the pending germane amendments which have been before us for some time, but which have now been cleared, we believe, and there's no opposition. But if there is, and people wanted to speak on it, I think Senator McCain wanted to be sure, as I do, that there be an opportunity for people to come down. So I would yield now to my friend from Arizona.
Reserving the right to object, I will not object. I thank my friend. I also believe that he overlooked a Brown amendment number 1090, I think, was agreed to be a part of that.
I did not, that was not on my sheet, but it's fine. Yeah. That would be added.
I note the presence of our friend from Texas who would like to voice his objections to the package of amendments which is pending, which have been agreed by both sides because of his concerns about a particular amendment that he had, and I'd like to hear from him in a minute. But I'd like to say to my colleagues on this side of the aisle, if you have an objection, please come to the floor. We would intend to vote or seek approval of these, of what the distinguished chairman just proposed at 5 after the hour. That gives him 15 minutes. I yield.
Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, is there a unanimous consent request pending?
Aye.
Thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to make sure. Madam President, I've discussed with the distinguished chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the ranking member, distinguished ranking member, my concerns that earlier I attempted to gain unanimous consent to modify my amendment with regarding the sale of F-16s to Taiwan in order to make it germane. And I was happy to do that in order to get a vote, but the chairman tells me there is an objection to that. So I wanted to make clear that any amendment that's offered, whether now in this list or subsequently in the manager's package or otherwise, that is being treated differently than mine is, that I'm going to object to unanimous consent. But I would ask, just for present purposes, through the chair, I'd ask the distinguished chairman of the Armed Services Committee, are there any amendments on this list that were modified in order to make them germane?
The answer is, and I've double-checked on this, the answer is no. It's about as directly as I can say it. We've checked with staff, and staff says that none of them have been modified, as I indicated, in many cases, but none in order to make them germane.
Madam President, I appreciate the direct response from the chairman. I'll have no objection to any amendment that's being offered that is not being offered as modified in order to make it germane. I hope my point's clear as mud, but I will yield the floor.
Senator from Arizona.
Can I just say that I strongly support the amendment by the senator from Texas, and I will do everything that I can to see that this issue is raised. I cannot comprehend why we would not want to provide one of our closest allies with the equipment they need to defend themselves with a growingly aggressive mainland China exhibiting the characteristics of intimidation and bullying and perhaps threatening Taiwan. So I want to assure, first of all, my appreciation to both senators from Texas who have been very involved in this issue, and I want to tell him that I will continue to do everything I can to see that this amendment is adopted. We need to send a signal that we do support our friends. I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Alabama.
Madam President, I just would join with Senator McCain in support of Senator Cornyn's amendment. Taiwan has been a strong ally of the United States. Senator McCain said we would provide them military aircraft, but in truth they would buy it. They're our allies, they're friends, they're prepared to purchase from an American company legitimate military equipment that they could use to help maintain their freedom that they've cherished on the island. And I think it's hard for me to understand how that would be objected to. So I just want to say, as someone who looked at these issues for some time as a member of the Armed Services Committee, I do believe Senator Cornyn, also a member of that committee, is correct. And I strongly support the amendment and urge my colleagues to vote for it if and when we can get a vote. I thank the chair, would yield the floor, and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Madam President.
Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I have an amendment that's been accepted, almost sort of kind of accepted. Amendment 1090 that I'd like to discuss briefly. And I want to thank Senators Wyden and Coons for their bipartisan leadership as co-sponsors of this amendment. I believe we're going to vote on it shortly, and I would ask that it be accepted either by vote or by UC. And it's a simple amendment that will make sure that the National Guardsmen who get deployed will receive the housing allowances that they need and deserve. This is a bipartisan amendment, and the Defense Department has agreed that the situation needs to be fixed, something that recently was developed. There's a little bit of history behind this, but I really don't think it's important because Senator Wyden and Senator Coons and I have taken the lead on this issue, which is critically important to providing the funds that have been taken merely by a change in the regulations. And it's at a time, quite frankly, that our men and women who are fighting need that money. And I'm introducing the amendment as a result of a bill I introduced last September entitled the National Guard Basic Allowance for Housing Equity Act. And I introduced this legislation to fix an inequity that hurts National Guardsmen who are deployed. Merely as a result of their deployment, Madam President, they could lose upwards of $1,000 per month in their monthly housing allowance. Basic Allowance for Housing, or BAH, is a benefit paid to members of the military to help offset the cost of local housing markets. And when a service member is deployed, for example, BAH is necessary to help offset the cost of a mortgage or rent in a particular geographic area. Everyone in the military, especially families, rely on this benefit. And this benefit is especially critical when service members deploy because, as we know, the spouse is often at home and she or he are responsible for taking care of the bills. What would you say, Madam President, if I told you that because you are ordered to deploy to Afghanistan, for example, the Department of Defense is going to withhold $1,000 or more from your monthly housing allowance, a huge piece of your total household income, upwards of $12,000 or more per year because of a new policy interpretation? You know, that's right. It's merely a new policy interpretation. And because of a DOD oversight, over 800 guardsmen, some even in your state, 40 in Massachusetts, who are deployed to Afghanistan right now are newly losing, in the middle of the battle, up to $1,000 per month in their housing allowance because they were ordered to deploy. Title 10 mandates that full-time guardsmen, when ordered to active duty for a contingency operation, even if there is no break in their active federal service, must revert back to their home of record status rather than their current duty station. And because of this change in status, it alters a guardsman's basic allowance for housing on their monthly pay stub. You're basically punishing a guardsman for being deployed to a war zone. For example, take a full-time National Guardsman who lives, say, is from Worcester. He calls Worcester, Massachusetts home and probably votes in Massachusetts, but he's stationed in Washington, D.C., let's say right down the street at the Pentagon. So he or she earns a housing allowance based on the cost of living in D.C., and as we all know, it is higher than in Worcester, Massachusetts. Sounds pretty normal, pretty straightforward, right? But, well, this guardsman is then ordered to active duty to federal status for the purpose of deploying overseas. A new housing allowance rate kicks in that is based on his home of record back in Worcester, not where he or she was actually stationed here in D.C. As a result, the guardsman and his family immediately start losing up to $1,000 per month because of that deployment to serve their country. So full-time guardsmen are entitled to the BAH rate they are receiving at the duty station because it is where they and their dependents live, and that's often where the spouses will reside until that service member comes back. They're not going back to Worcester while he or she was stationed, obviously, at the Pentagon or here in D.C. It's not right. It's something that the DOD agrees with. Senator Wyden and Coons concurred, and I appreciate their bipartisanship in moving this forward. And I'm all about finding savings, but the good thing is that, this is no cost to the government. It's already budgeted in the DOD budget, and I'm not into savings that treat our service men and women unfairly. So it provides a simple, non-controversial fix. It is germane. It's relevant. It helps people who are serving our country right now, and it is bipartisan. It's how we should do things around here. I'm glad the DOD has realized that this is a problem, and I hope my colleagues will really move forward in a manner to make our citizens proud. And I want to thank Senator McCain for his effort in getting this really important matter to our guardsmen who are serving presently overseas. It's a testament to his diligence, and I want to thank Chairman Levin for putting up the problems throughout the last few days, but it's important to people. It's not about politics. It's about serving our men and women. Thank you, Madam President.
Can we go with this now?
Mr. President. Yes. Madam
Senator from Arizona.
I want to thank Senator from Massachusetts for his amendment. He spent a great deal of time in his life serving in the National Guard, including spending time in Afghanistan recently. He understands the burdens that our National Guard men and women bear, and I am very grateful for his careful attention to their needs, and this is clearly an issue that needed to be addressed, and we are proud to have it as part of our legislation. So again, my thanks to the Senator from Massachusetts and also to my friend Chairman Levin for making this amendment possible. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander. The senator from Michigan is recognized.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that further proceedings in the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President, I now ask unanimous consent that the following pending germane amendments be considered en bloc, that the amendments be modified with the changes that are at the desk where applicable. Begich number 1114 is modified. McCain number 1220. Reed of Rhode Island 1146 as modified. Levin 1293 as modified. Boxer 1206. Chambliss 1304 is modified. Pryor 1151. Nelson of Florida, 1236, Blunt, 1133 is modified, Murkowski, 1287 is modified, and Brown, number 1090 is modified, and further that the amendments be agreed to en bloc.
Is there objection? Without objection, the amendments are agreed to.
I ask unanimous consent now that the following two amendments be withdrawn, Collins 1105 and Collins 1158.
Is there objection? Without objection, the amendments will be withdrawn.
I have to go back and make them work pending again. This is the quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka.
Madam President.
The senator from Louisiana is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask unanimous consent to vitiate the quorum call.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for up to 10 minutes on a different topic than the Defense Authorization Bill.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I come to the Senate floor to discuss another very important issue for our economy, which is the National Flood Insurance Program. National Flood Insurance Program is a vital federal program that helps provide flood insurance for properties all across the country. And it is absolutely vital to citizens and to our economy, to the real estate market, to closings, which can't happen without this type of insurance in many instances. It's important all across the country. It's nowhere more important than in Louisiana, which unfortunately has pretty severe flooding risks. Now, Madam President, in the last few years we've extended this necessary important program, but sometimes with real fits and starts and even lapses of the program. As you know, in 2010 it really got worse than ever. Congress allowed the National Flood Insurance Program to lapse 4 times for a total of 53 days, really for no good reason. Wasn't a money issue, wasn't a cost issue, wasn't a deficit issue, because continuation of the program along the current structure does not raise deficit and debt. But we had these deadlines that kept approaching, and we let, in many instances, in 4 instances, the deadline to actually come and the program to lapse 4 times in 2010 for a total of 53 days. That had enormous negative consequences. Closings, real estate closings that were scheduled to happen had to be canceled. Now, here we are in the middle of a horrendous recession, clearly the worst since World War II, led by problems in the real estate market. And we had good, solid real estate closings which had to be put off and canceled for no good reason. Really crazy. We learned a little bit from that experience, and this year in 2011, we've done better. We've continued the program without lapse. But I'm afraid, Madam President, we're getting back into this habit of extremely short-term extensions, which brings with it the threat of lapses. We just extended the program a few weeks ago, but we only extended it for the duration of the current CR until this December 16th. So again, the program is set to completely expire nationwide this December 16th. Now, Madam President, the ultimate solution is a long-term, full reauthorization of the flood insurance program. And I support that full 6-year bill. And we have voted out of the Senate Banking Committee a full, long-term, 6-year reauthorization bill. However, Madam President, that's not going to pass into law between now and December 16th. And it's pretty clear it's not going to pass into law for several months. So, Madam President, that's why I'm urging all of us to come together in a bipartisan fashion in the meantime to pass a clean extension of the program for the remainder of this fiscal year through September 30th, 2012, or for some significantly long time within that year. I think that is needed right now to assure the real estate market that there won't be disruptions, to take that threat and that uncertainty out of the market and out of the line of closings that we want to encourage, that we want to build as we try to build up the real estate market and the economy in general. Because I believe this is clearly the right path, Madam President, I've done 2 things. First, I've filed that extension, that clean extension, a bill under my name through September 30th, 2012. This is very similar to the extension we passed in late 2010 to get us through that fiscal year to September 30th, 2011. That was my bill. We passed it unanimously here in the Senate, again, to avoid these deadlines and disruptions which hamper economic recovery. So I've filed that bill. That would be a clean extension of the program through September 30th, 2012. Second thing I did today was write Senator Reid, the majority leader, and ask him to focus on this important program and the need for this extension as soon as possible, and to hotline it through the Senate to ask for unanimous consent, both sides, all members, as we did about a year ago, pass this so that we extend the program, important, vital program, through September 30th, 2012, or some similar significant time frame. Again, I just wrote Senator Reid today to highlight this need. I'll be following up with him. I've already followed up and talked to many other interested members, starting with those leaders on the Banking Committee under whose jurisdiction this falls. So, Madam President, this should be a no-brainer. This should be a completely nonpartisan or bipartisan exercise. This is not some big ideological dispute. This is simply extending, continuing a vital, necessary program without in any way increasing deficit and debt, in a way that we take out uncertainty, take out the specter of this necessary program lapsing yet again, as it did 4 times in 2010 for a total of 53 days. We can't let this lapse, and quite frankly, we shouldn't even go near the deadline before we extend it, because that, in and of itself, even if we don't technically allow it to lapse, creates uncertainty and chaos in the real estate market and disrupts real estate closings. We need every good real estate transaction we can get. We need every bit of additional economic activity we can get in this horrible economy, this recession that was led by a bad real estate market. We need to lead recovery with a recovering real estate market. So let's do this in a simple, straightforward, common sense, bipartisan way in that effort. We did it around my bill in that nearly full year extension about a year ago. Let's do it again. In closing, Madam President, I want to underscore, I am fully committed to the full, detailed 6-year reauthorization bill. It's come out of the Senate Banking Committee. It needs to pass through the Senate. We need to resolve differences with the House. We need to pass that into law. But that's not going to happen between now and December 16th, and it's not going to happen for several months. So in the meantime, let's remove the threat of disruption, of lapses in the program, of uncertainty. All of that is extremely harmful in this very fragile economy. Thank you, Madam President. I yield back the floor, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Akaka. The senator from South Dakota is recognized.
Senate, in a quorum call,
Yes, it is.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be lifted and that I be allowed to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam President, yesterday a number of us, in fact, I think the number now is somewhere in the 37 to 38 ballpark of senators, introduced legislation to expedite consideration of the Keystone XL pipeline. What's interesting to me about all this is that this is a project that's been literally reviewed and analyzed and studied and scrutinized now for the better part of 3 years. In fact, they've had 2 comprehensive environmental evaluations and 3 years of study and review. And then just recently, the Obama administration deferred a decision on the permit until after the 2012 election, essentially put it off the decision for about 18 months. Well, what's ironic and sort of interesting about that, Madam President, is that this is a project which, after having been carefully vetted for the past 3 years, carefully reviewed, carefully studied, all the environmental impact analysis done, would lead to all kinds of economic development for this country and job creation in many of the states that are impacted. Our state of South Dakota happens to be one of those. The pipeline traverses South Dakota as it heads down to refineries and other places in the country. But it would benefit my state by generating significant amounts of state and local tax revenue that's much needed by many of the local jurisdictions, school districts, counties, municipalities in the state of South Dakota. And so there's a tremendous benefit to the construction of this pipeline to the various states who are impacted simply as a result of the additional tax revenue that would be raised by it. Now, you add to that, in my state of South Dakota, the hundreds of jobs that would be created, the $500 million of economic activity that it would generate, and this is very clear from the state of South Dakota standpoint, which is why I believe our governor has weighed in behind this project, that this is something that ought to at least be decided. There's no reason why, no rational reason why, no logical reason why this project would be delayed for 18 months simply to get past the next election. We've done all the work has been done. It seems to me at least that there ought to be a decision made. Now, you're talking about a $7 billion investment here in this country and partly in Canada to get where the oil sands is, to get the oil to the refineries in the United States. And if you look at the overall, as I said, economic impact number of jobs created, it's pretty impressive. 20,000 jobs, I think, is what the estimate is that it would create in this country. And those are jobs that, frankly, many of these states could certainly benefit from. Not to mention the fact that you are doing business with somebody who is favorable and friendly to us. Canada is our biggest trading partner. We do, I think, about $640 billion annually of bilateral trade with Canada. Canada is a country with which we have a very good, strong trading relationship. It strikes me, at least, that if we're going to get oil from somewhere, that it makes sense to get it from a country like Canada as opposed to some of the other countries around the world that are much less friendly to the United States. In fact, the Keystone XL pipeline would transport about 700, I think 700, let me check here the number, barrels of oil each year, 700 million barrels, billion barrels. I'll get that number here in just a minute. But it's the equivalent, I should say 700,000 daily. That's what I'm looking for. 700,000 daily barrels of oil that would come through that pipeline. And what that is the equivalent of is the amount that we get on a daily basis from Venezuela. And so if you're thinking about getting 700,000 barrels of oil from somewhere in the world, wouldn't it make a lot more sense to get it from Canada as opposed to getting it from Venezuela? So I think in terms of what it does for our energy independence, for our energy security and dealing with a friendly nation and making it more possible for our country to become less dependent upon foreign countries around the world for this energy that we need in this country, it strikes me at least that this particular project makes a lot of sense. So you've got not only the economic impact in terms of the activity that would create in the various states that would be impacted by it, the number of jobs that would be created, and I said 20,000 jobs is the estimate, $7 billion initial investment, and all the tax revenue generated for state and local governments along the way. Now, wouldn't it be nice if the United States got into the situation where we were actually an energy exporter? Believe it or not, this is the first year in the last 62, and this is according to a story that ran in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. According to data released by the U.S. Energy Information Administration on Tuesday, the U.S. sent abroad 753.4 million barrels of everything from gasoline to jet fuel in the first 9 months of this year, while it imported 689.4 million barrels. That means that for the first time in 62 years, in 2011, if this trend continues, and it looks like it will, we will have exported more energy than we imported. Now, we are still a net importer of petroleum, of oil, and hopefully we can change that at some point in the future by developing these areas, these resources that we have in this country, one of which is the Bakken Reserve in the state of North Dakota, which is generating enormous amounts of oil for this country. So we're still an oil importer, net oil importer, but in terms of overall energy, refined gasoline, other types of products, for the first time in 62 years, in 2011, we may be a net exporter of energy. That is an amazing, I think, data point, and suggests that this could be something that could benefit enormously the American economy. Well, in order for that to happen, we have to have those resources that we can get from the oil sands in Canada, bring them into the United States where they're refined in refineries here in the U.S., and then either used here or sent abroad. But it's a way that we can generate additional economic activity and additional jobs for our economy. This is a quote from somebody, Global Director of Oil at Platts, which tracks energy markets, and he said that this trend that we're going to see this year in 2011, again, as I mentioned, the first time in 62 years that we will be a net exporter of energy, this gentleman says it looks like a trend that could stay in place for the rest of the decade. That is a remarkable change in terms of just the flow of energy from this country. The last time we were a net exporter of energy in this country was during World War II and shortly thereafter. So it's been over 60 years, Madam President. That's what a project like this could do for our country. Not just the immediate impact on those states through which this pipeline would traverse in terms of, as I said earlier, the tax revenue that would be generated for state and local governments, but you also have the economic activity that it creates in those states, the jobs that it creates in those states, and what it does in order to move us increasingly away from dependence upon other countries in the world with whom we have, at best, shaky relationships to start with. Doing business with our largest trading partner, a country with whom we do enormous amounts of trade every single year, it seems to me at least to be a much better solution to this country's energy needs than is getting that same amount of energy from other countries around the world. As I mentioned, 700,000 barrels a day is what the pipeline would transport into this country, and that is the equivalent that we get on a daily basis from Venezuela. And so a project that really ought to be decided. Now, whether or not it's decided affirmatively, and obviously, as you can tell, I believe it should, and there are people in my state of South Dakota who are opposed to this. There have been ample opportunities for public input at hearings and that sort of thing, public forums for people to comment on it. And so it's, there have been lots of opportunities for those who are opposed to it to weigh in. But notwithstanding that, again, all the analysis that's been done, all the review that's been done, all the study that's been done and now completed has indicated that there isn't any reason for this not to move forward. And particularly now, given the fact that the state of Nebraska has negotiated with TransCanada, the builder of that pipeline, an agreement that would take it in a slightly different direction through that state. So all those hoops have been cleared, all those hurdles have been cleared. There really isn't any reason why this should be delayed another 18 months after the next presidential election, other than for purely and simply political reasons. So I would hope that we will be able to get good, strong support here in the United States Senate for this legislation that would allow this to be decided in a more immediate time frame. As I said, right now the administration has punted this until after the next election for 18 months down the road. What this legislation would do would enable this to be decided in the next couple of months, next 60 days or so. subject obviously to there's some requirements in there, obviously all the strongest environmental requirements, but all those things being said, all those things having been reviewed, all those things having been accomplished, it is time for a decision on this important project, and I would hope that we can get strong support here in the United States Senate for this legislation. It's been introduced by a number of my colleagues, a senator from North Dakota, Senator Hoeven, Senator Johans from Nebraska, Senator Murkowski from Alaska, a number of others. I'm a co-sponsor of it, as I said. At last count, I think it has somewhere along the lines of 37 or 38 co-sponsors. And it passed in the House of Representatives, incidentally, already. And so there is a vehicle out there that has passed one body of Congress. It would be my hope that we would be able to get action on it here in the United States Senate, and that it might be something that we could do that would have an immediate impact on jobs. You know, we always talk about shovel-ready projects. Well, this is a shovel-ready project. This thing is ready to go. They are ready to start construction of this project, and it has been through the last 3 years all of the process that this government can require it to go through in order to make sure that this is a project that should move forward. So, Madam President, the legislation, the bill number, and I'll have it here for you in a moment. I can't find the bill number, but in any event, I will get that for the record. But I think it's important for this body to act on this legislation and allow us to get to where we can actually get a decision on this project, a decision that will lead to more economic activity, more economic impact, more jobs for Americans, more energy security for this country, and hopefully, at the end of the day, a lessening of the dangerous dependence that we have on foreign sources of energy and that we would like to get away from. And so I think it's a win-win all the way around. I congratulate the co-sponsor, the sponsors of this legislation, for the thoughtful way that they have considered this, the way they have put this legislation together, and I would hope that it's for its consideration here in the United States Senate. Madam President, with that, I yield the floor. Madam President.